Well, hello and welcome to another episode of It's Your Own Time You're Wasting, Terry and Olly Talk Teaching, in which myself, Terry Wood, here in London, talks to my good friend and former colleague, Olly Furnival in Japan, about all things related to the profession of teaching. Um, Today, we're going to do something slightly different, aren't we, Olly? In that we're going to
Yep.
do, we haven't done this yet, so we're hoping it's going to go well. We're going to do our occasional series of top threes, in which we pick different topics and focuses about the profession, and we each pick our top threes in that category and communicate why we've chosen those as the top threes. And I should say before we get going with our first, obviously, if you're watching us, you like our content and you're enjoying it, then press the like button. Share the content, please. Subscribe, of course. Try to get as many subscribers as possible. And you can email us. We've now got our email properly sorted out, and it'll appear at the very end of this video. But it is, if you want to know now, it is Terry and Olly Talk Teaching at gmail.com. But that would appear again at the very end of this video. So I'll kick off if that's okay, Olly. You're okay with that?
Yep. No problem.
My first category was three things all new teachers or teachers new to the profession should buy before they start. Should I go first with that, or do you want to go first?
That no, yeah, you give the
I'll
top
go
three and
first.
I'll
I'll go
respond,
first.
mate. Yep.
Well, my first one is a really good pair of shoes, or maybe two, because you are going to do a lot more walking than you ever thought possible for what is it, based in one room. If you're teaching properly, you're going to be walking around the classroom a lot, and schools can be big places, particularly big secondary schools, up and downstairs, to and from meetings, outside on duty. A good pair of shoes. Don't get fancy light shoes. You'll go through three pairs in a year. So there's my number one. I'll keep going, and then you get your three. My second one is loads and loads and loads of black or blue Bic pens. If kids are going to turn up without one item, it's going to be a pen. Some kids are able to lose about three in a day. Isn't that right, Olly?
Oh
Easily.
God, hundreds,
One of the good
non-stop.
things about being a teacher is at the end of each lesson, you will pick up three pens from the floor every time the class leaves, particularly for secondary age kids. And you're going to have a drawer full of them. But I'd definitely start with loads of pens. So you're not kept waiting with, I haven't got a pen. Just drop one on the desk. Don't even talk about it. It's not a problem. And finally, get a normal 12-month diary to go along with your teacher's September to July, whatever it is, diary, depending on the school year. You've got to still realize that you're a normal person. Your life has changed now because the holidays are structured so rigorously and differently from everybody else. But you mustn't forget that you're a normal citizen and human being. And to save your sanity, get a normal 12-month diary. They're mine, Olly. What do you think?
Yeah, I think they're really three great bits of advice there, Terry. I certainly back all those three up, along with the shoes. The point you made about the walking, definitely, you might want to. I'm sure the school will provide boxes, but depending on the way your school is designed, you might well be walking around with 30 books, if
Oh, yeah.
excuse me, if not textbooks around the school.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
would certainly say that. Yeah, I really like your point on the pens. I think it's really important that we teach organisation skills. However, we can be doing this job, same kids for years, they are going to forget. And I think it's really nice for the teacher without making a fuss, just drop it on, get it at
Yeah.
the end. And I think something like that is really appreciated by the students as well, because otherwise, it might be their own disorganization, but it might be things behind the scenes that we've looked at in the past episodes about finances, etc. Maybe some kids can lose a pen and parents just replace it while others can't. So yeah, I really think they're three great bits of advice
Okay,
for the
let's have yours
teacher.
then. What have you got?
Okay, great. Yeah, so my first category I want to talk about today is getting yourself out there and known within a new school. And I think this is really important for new teachers, but also established teachers. Whenever I've moved schools, the reputation that I've built up in one school means nothing in a new school. Students aren't going to know anything about it. So you've really got to get yourself known again. And I think it's really important that teachers don't become the person stuck in their own classroom. They have to become part of the community. So number one, my first bit of advice would be, yeah, to engage in school-wide activities. For example, go to sport events. If you hear about the netball football match that evening, when you can, try to go. Um, that could not obviously that can make you see students outside of the academic circumstances, about the pressure of you trying to get them to do the
Yeah.
work, and you can build common interests, and then you can respond to them the next day about, oh, you played well last night. And the kids really like it if you go to their sports events, if you go to a school
Yeah,
show,
they do.
if you help out on a school fete example. And I think that's really important for building relationships and showing yourselves a different side, of students showing a different side, and also the teacher showing a different side. We spoke before about, finding some, never being alone when you find difficulties with students. And I remember a long time ago I was having difficulty with some students, and I was like, right, I knew they were part of the school drama production, so I was asked, could I help out? And I did. And I purposely thought, right, I'm going to hone in on those students that aren't particularly well behaved in my classroom. And in the long term, I thought it really worked well. So that's my first thing: engage in school wide activities as much as possible. Number two would be to run a club. Now, this can be done in an area of interest for you. So that could be, I don't know, a debate club or Model United Nations, etc. But also, even if you aren't at that stage yet in your career, you could help out others in a club. So choose a club you want to help out in and be the support teacher. That will also make you look like a really resourceful colleague to the other teachers in the school. But also, the students will see you're putting yourselves out in your own time, and they will really appreciate that, and you'll be seen around the school. You don't have to do a club that you are skilled at. So for example, in the last year I've been overseeing the knitting club. The reason is our knitting club teacher left
Mhm.
the school onto a new school. I can't knit, but I just said, well, I'll be the body in the room. So every once a week, every Tuesday I think it is, we just have students knit, and we actually link that to service, so they're knitting for the homeless here in Tokyo. The third way to get yourself known in a school is to, if you can, choose your duty points. Now, some schools might tell you where to go, but I think be clever and go for the harder places. Um, it's good if you're new to choose a duty with a respected teacher, someone where, if you're going in a hard place, the dinner queue where there's people really wanting to be served before the end of break or lunch, or the late gates where you have to, challenge students. I think that's really good. So students can see that you're, one, in communication with other teachers, but two, you're getting known outside. And if you're challenging students where they shouldn't be outside of the classroom, they're going to, over time, understand that you're actually a good person, an important person of the school, and you're going to get some respect. I found going to the difficult places helped me. And one duty year, I asked to go to the places where students shouldn't be. So smoking behind the skip, I remember, on the break time duty. I did
Mhm.
one on lunchtime gate in a school we worked at. You could go out if you had a pass, but others, of course, tried it on. In fact, once one students tried to, on a non-uniform day, tried to come into the school, and I thought, well, that's not the way it should be working. I'm trying to stop them going out. The last thing linked to that on the duty post is make your corridor a duty post. Get yourself out in a corridor between every class, especially in a busy corridor where you can just have a quick word with students as they pass. Keep them in order, get yourself known. And I've really thought, oh, I've made it now. And I used to do that a lot. And I remember once on the edge of the corridor, I saw a bunch of students where they shouldn't be. And I overheard Furnivals coming, and I got around the corner and they were all acting very innocent. I thought, right, yeah, they know who I am now. Yeah, I'll let it go this time. You have a bit of banter with it, but it's really good. So get yourself out in the corridor between classes. So they're my three ways to get yourselves known throughout the school.
Sound advice, yeah, particularly the last one about duty. I'd add to that by saying, yeah, don't stand there sheepishly trying to hide and looking miserable because your time's been taken off you. Although you'll occasionally feel that way. Talk to the kids, even kids
Yeah,
that you don't teach particularly, but particularly those that you do teach, so they can see another side of you socially. I always remember a colleague asking kids in a history or geography lesson, can't remember which, could they name any notable conflict zones, thinking about the world.
sure.
And she replied, outside the boys' toilets at lunchtime. So,
Brilliant.
yeah, those lunchtime duties, particularly, it's important if you can to get involved and get known.
Yeah,
Right, my
I
second
definitely agree with that.
category is yeah, I'll go for this one. The funniest excuses of the very many, many hundreds of excuses I was given by kids who can be quite inventive and funny, definitely. for either being late to form in the morning, form group in the
Sure.
morning, or for not getting work done, etc. My three favourites. The first one would be, I'll give the boy's first name, but not the second name. Clearly, his name was Richard, many years ago, and he came in late to morning registration and apologized. He was a lovely boy. Apologised profusely for being late because he'd chosen to come on his bike that day and he was against the wind. However, I pointed out to Richard that he lived about 350 yards away from school, so
Brilliant.
it didn't quite work.
Brilliant.
Secondly, a guy that from one of the parents actually an excuse via the pupil. The boy again was late in the morning for morning registration, and his dad sent a little scribbled note in saying apologies. I can't remember the boy's name for being late. His trousers were frozen, and unfortunately, there'd been a kind of breakdown in the family. Mum had left. Dad was looking
Right.
after the kids and struggling a bit. So what he'd done is he'd washed the uniform, particularly the trousers, on the Sunday night, hung them on the line in the middle of January. A frost had come in overnight, and they were
Brilliant.
rock solid in the morning. Apparently, they spent 15
Brilliant.
minutes together defrosting them bit by bit in the microwave. So that was secondly. And I remember it was a girl once who said to me, Sir, I know I've not been doing well recently. I've not been meeting deadlines. I'm really sorry for my impotence. And I said, impotence? She said, you know, when you don't get things done on time and you keep putting it off. I said, you mean procrastination? That's the one.
That's the one.
So
Brilliant.
they would be my top three. I know you haven't got your own, but I mean,
Um,
hundreds how many years. Can you think of any
well,
at all?
I've yeah, I've got some good ones. One, kind of. Well, also, I want to just question you about the parents. What's your advice to people when the parent makes backs it up? So, I mean, linked to my one, a good parent one I remember was student in my form had missed an important assessment,
Yeah.
coursework for GCSE, and hadn't come to school, still late. And yeah, he just his excuse was, well, I had to go Christmas shopping. So what did I do? I rang home and said, excuse me, this student, that's not an acceptable excuse. And the mum said, yeah, we did. We went Christmas shopping. So how do you feel like when a parent kind of backs up something that perhaps is not with the way we want to
Well,
go as a
I think the first thing is don't get the kid in the middle of it as much as you can because you never quite
good?
know what's going on at home, what the relationship and whether that kid's under duress to do those things and others. So you've got to tread really carefully. Clearly, you can't just let it pass because the kids need to be in school. It's likely if you're, let's say, a quite junior form tutor or even more senior, but without the responsibility of a year group and the pastoral care involved in that, that you need to immediately pass that on to the head of year or pastoral
Yeah, I
lead
agree.
or not safeguarding. It's not that, but it might actually, the parents that are going to find excuses for not having the kids in school tend to be the same parents where there are other issues.
Yeah,
And there can be a multiplicity of different things going on. So it's often a
yeah, I
sign
totally
of
agree.
something. So you can't sit on it. But
No,
the
I
thing
totally
to do
agree.
is to tread softly with the kid because the kid's
Yeah,
probably caught right in the middle and they're clearly going to be loyal to their parents before you. Why would they not be? And therefore, yeah, just be careful.
I think that's great advice for anyone listening. One, one I had. We once went to the courts up in Nottingham. So yeah, we were
Mhm.
based in Essex. So a long day out, and
Yeah,
on the way
citizenship
back,
trip. Yeah,
yeah, a
yeah.
citizenship with history trip actually.
Oh,
Yeah, so it was a
okay.
nice cross-curricular trip, and it was with the year 11, and the student was in my form, and we stopped off at the services on the way back and found her smoking with the bus driver.
Ah,
And so, of course, yeah, her excuse was, well, he asked me if I had a light. So, yeah, I had to deal with that on the Monday afterwards. Yeah, it was like,
and she did
come
have
on.
a light. I take it.
Oh, she had a light, and I don't know if he gave her the cigarette or her, but yeah, of
He
course, we
probably
followed it up
provided
with
the
the company.
cigarettes too. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it was
yeah. It's
it was over.
interesting.
But
I think what it says is that sometimes there's the people that outside of the profession that don't get the same boundaries.
yeah,
They don't,
exactly.
they don't realize what pressure you're under on trip. They'll say, "What
Yeah,
you worried about? Just let them do what they want. They're good kids." Well, yeah, but hang on,
yeah.
I've got a certain role to play here. That's a good one.
And
Yeah, Yeah,
Yeah, and
but
how much follow-up time that takes in dealing with the student, the parents, the company. Yeah, so that always sticks. Another one, not so much an excuse, but just the way kids can use what's going on in the modern world. I remember when Little Britain was big back,
oh yeah, yeah,
probably 20 odd years ago,
yeah,
and
20 years or so. Yeah,
uh, asked a student if he had his homework in front of the whole class, and he just came back with computer says no, and like
yeah,
everyone burst out laughing. About, all right,
clever.
well, yeah, you got to roll with those.
You've
Young,
got
you
to, yeah,
don't. But
you've got to.
it still makes me chuckle now, even 20 odd years later. But don't, yeah, I'm sure I sorted it out. But
Yeah,
yeah,
good
computer
stuff.
says no.
Anyway, your next category.
Yeah, I wanted to give some top tips about the way weather can affect
Oh yeah,
students
yeah, yeah.
and what teachers can do about it.
Mhm.
So I think certainly I didn't even consider the weather before I went into teaching and the effect it can have on the classroom. But I think it's really big. Going from too hot, which can often happen, in certainly where we were in the south of England more
Yeah,
recently, to too cold. When it's too cold, it's really funny because the kids then start quoting the law at you. Oh, you can't teach me under -3. So it's like, you get
yeah.
all these
They
really,
can talk about cattle. That cattle can be transported at certain temperatures, but we
yeah.
can't work all of that stuff. Yeah,
Exactly. So the first one is the rain, the wet breaks. So if you're teaching a lesson after wet break when the kids have been stuck in their form room for a break instead of the usual running around for 15, 20 minutes, it can be a real pain. The kids can come in with too much energy, complaining, they're
hmm,
restless, and it can cause poor behavior. So and kids will change in a lot of the weathers. So yeah, I think if you're coming in from a wet break, I know I've heard some advice about keeping activities, giving them the movement activities, which I think's got merit in. So where they can walk around, gets rid of some of the energy, the yes no stations, the speed
yeah.
questions. But my advice would be to really look at your lesson plan and have your plan B and something to slow it down at the beginning because kids are going to come bit wet, maybe overexcited, maybe they're still wet from walking to school. So my first bit of advice would be slow it down, because some students will use the weather as an excuse. And then I would say if you once you've got control, because even a lot of rain in a day can make you maybe not have as much control as you normally have with that class. So I would say slow down straight away. Have those activities first of all, and then go on to try to get them under controlled conditions to do the moving things activities, but don't be scared to cull them. Only last week, not related to whether I said this activity is not working, class. We're going to sit and write this. Give them a choice at first, but right, it's not working. So don't be afraid to do that. Um, Actually, linked to rain is it's interesting the way the cold and the dark in countries such as Great Britain
Mhm.
can have an effect on students, even especially now with a lot more people moving around internationally. I know it's
Yeah,
still small in numbers, but there is a larger minority. And I remember teaching in England, not the school we were both at, but we had a girl who had just come from South America.
yeah.
And yeah, we had to deal with her because she couldn't handle the cold, dark early evenings. And
It's a big issue
I
in
think,
London. I mean, obviously the
yeah,
very, very high immigration
sure,
levels into London. The kids are coming from very, very different climates and struggling to adapt.
yeah. So I think for those, and even with the kids who've been in England a long time, or any country where it's dark early a long time, is activities to raise the mood. Perhaps
Oh yeah.
responding to a nice video, pictures to allow them to maybe use a little bit of imagination and trying to make it a little bit more fun than normal, especially on, really glum, horrible days. Some kids can be affected by it. The second thing I'll talk about would be the heat. I
Mm,
taught in a school in England where we had a lovely new humanities block. However, it was lovely, beautiful big windows, which just made it an absolute sauna for especially, late June into July. And, kids that can really have an effect, probably more on the cold, because once the kids are in the room and it's cold or snowing outside or whatever, it's generally warm in the school. However, when it's too hot, it's harder because not many schools have aircon. So for that, I would have smaller tasks to keep concentration. Maybe break the tasks up in a lesson, and maybe start thinking about having small breaks in the lesson. So right, we're all struggling here. Let's just have a 2 minute break. Have a chat with your friends about anything you want. I think they'll appreciate it. And again, don't be scared to break your lesson up because I think over hot classes, as you've said, I'm over in Japan and We do have a part of the school where the air cons touch and go. And yeah, that can have a big effect on students, the heat, and it can really lower the atmosphere of the class, and it's not much fun. The third thing I would talk about regarding weather is when it does get to a stage where it's affecting attendance and punctuality. So the snow with the trains or the roads or even the heavy rain can affect transport. And there can be nothing more frustrating as a teacher than you've got your lesson plan ready and then kids are coming in through no fault of their own, drip, drip, drip through the lesson. And that can be really hard because you're going to get a disrupted lesson. And my advice would be there when that happens, and it will happen a couple of times a year perhaps, where my advice there would be just do a recap lesson. Just think, right, I'm going to shelve this for the rest of the day. If kids are in and out, and then when they're coming in, they're all flustered. And then yeah, just do a recap lesson. Perhaps have more individual tasks rather than group tasks. So when one student walks in 5 minutes later when a group activity started, it's always hard to get them on up to date with what's going on. So maybe more individual tasks and also more reflection tasks on what you've been teaching because that can be really frustrating when it happens.
Yeah, a lot of good points. Got a lot of thought going into that. It's interesting, isn't it, that here now in the UK, since COVID and since all at that time, and it's obviously the same in Japan, teaching went online through Zoom and
Yeah,
Teams and so on. Snow days have now gone.
that's right.
So there's no excuse for teachers to sit at home desperately waiting for the radio or the television to tell them
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
likely to
that
be
day.
snowing, so you won't be going in. You'll be working even if you're at home. So all of that's kind of changed. The one little kind of amusing thing I would add, I always used to not hate because I always like September's because I think it's bright and new and everybody's positive. But
Sure.
it's in, of course, in the southeast in England, it's very much the time of the wasp.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, windows are open in non-air conditioned schools, and you only need one wasp in a
Yeah.
classroom to cause existential chaos.
Yes.
Strangely enough, in the schools I was visiting this September, we didn't seem to have any wasps at all because we've had
Right.
such a damp summer, I think. But yeah, so just to add to that, well, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
no,
something
that's
I would add to the thing about when it does get particularly hot, and I've been in some
yeah.
classrooms that were unbearable. You've got to treat the kids as you would, as much as you can adults. It's your job to
Yeah.
keep them working and not to soft soap them too much, but have a bit of thought.
Yeah.
None of us, we get to a certain temperature where none of us want to bother.
No.
So be sensible in your decisions. Don't, slavishly follow something that isn't working. It's just
Yeah. I think that's good advice. Be
that
be prepared to
you'll
make that
lose them.
change. I
But
we have the wasp equivalent in my school in Japan is a mosquito. And yeah,
oh yeah,
even
yeah.
lovely kids would just go absolutely crazy for a mosquito. And you can lose like just lose control until you get it back. It's like one little mosquito, which is harder to get rid of than a wasp in many ways. So yeah, I've
I
had
think in
that few.
Australia it's having a huntsman spider in the wall,
Awful.
which would is definitely a lot scarier than a
Yeah, but
wasp.
I'd be the one starting the chaos if that was going to happen, if that walked into
I think
my
you
class.
would. Oh yeah, you and your spiders. Yeah, I've seen. You're not a fan, are you?
No, I'm
You get some big
terrified. They're
spiders there,
awful.
don't you? Yeah.
Awful. Awful.
Right. It's my final
Yep.
category, isn't it? And they are the 3 days in the average school year, and both primary and secondary, because these offer both now to look forward to that you might not think about. And the one that, and this tends, of course, to be the secondary school event, tends to happen in September. So within 2 or 3 weeks of going back in September, and even though it's an imposition on your time and it's quite a big commitment, is the open evening. The open
Yep.
evening, for those that don't know, is when the school opens its doors after school or in the evening for prospective parents and pupils from primary to come into the school to see what it offers, to see kids working, talk to teachers, look at work, and so on. And it's done well. It's a really positive. It can be a really positive event. Talking to
Definitely.
the younger kids and the parents, showing off the excellent work you've achieved and all the materials you've got. And often when you get like year 8 and year 9, maybe kids who are
Mm.
given their first responsibility, even the year
Yeah.
sevens, of course, who still know the little kids back at the former primary school, to be the prefects. So you'll
Yeah.
get these little year sevens, year eights who have been in the school not very long, guiding the parents and the primary school kids around the school and showing it off with pride. And then you get home at 10 o'clock and you're absolutely shattered and you think, oh my God. But when you look back, you think, do you know what? I really enjoyed that. It was
Yeah.
worthwhile. I always liked them, even though I
Yeah.
probably moaned about having to set them up and do them. My second one is the last day of the Christmas term or the last day of the winter term. Um, Obviously, we're talking particularly Christian faith-based schools, but this could apply beyond that for obviously the winter religious break. And there's always a nice buzz. The
Yeah.
end of the year in July, everybody's shattered. People
Yeah.
drift away from the building. It's light, and it doesn't quite have the same impact. Suddenly, at, I don't know if it's an early finish, 1 o'clock, the school empties of kids. They've all got tinsel on them. They've all got multicolored
Yeah.
scarves. People have tried to teach to the bitter end, but given up. And there's Christmas videos and quizzes and fun. And
Yeah.
it's a there's a very I've never been in a school where there's not a nice atmosphere on that particular day. It's just a nice play time to be there as a community. And of course, the one little memory that sticks with me is at the school we worked with in Essex. My first year there, I think, my first Christmas last day, I turned onto the bebop, the long bebop corridor. You remember that because you taught on
Yeah.
it, to see a Christmas tree telling a very disruptive, naughty pupil off. And this was a guy called, I won't give his second name, but a teacher head of year called Armit,
Yeah.
whose
No.
wife was very, very skilled at creating costumes for him. And every Christmas it would be Santa and Elf. On this occasion, he was a walking Christmas tree. And I couldn't tell it was a man other
Brilliant.
than it was emitting a voice. So that's the second one. The last day of
Yeah.
Christmas is always a great day. And everybody's
Yeah.
tired. It's dark. You're going home to Christmas with the family. It's great. And the
Lovely. Yeah.
final one would be, and they do this for those that are kind of only think this is a secondary school thing, they now do it a lot of primary schools, and that's the prom. That's the school
Right.
prom at the end of the year for the kids leaving. And I know it's an American, people say, oh, it's an Americanized, commercialized thing, and it is often, but it's a great celebration of so many good
Sure.
things. You and I have been to events together
Yeah.
in which you find that the kids finally get to collectively express what their teachers and the school has meant to them.
Yeah.
They're all in their finery. They're all acting like adults and pretending
Yeah.
to be more grown up than they are. And they're just nice events. And all this nonsense that people say, oh well, the older kids at 16 they'll all get drunk and it'll all be chaos. It's not. It's
No.
not. They buy into it. They understand the privilege of it. Their parents have often spent a lot of money
Yeah.
in getting limousines and beautiful dresses and suits. And they actually treat my experiences, and I'm sure it's the same for you, they treat the whole thing with a lot of kind of reverence and respect. Would you agree?
Definitely. I absolutely love the proms. Got some great memories of the ones we went to. And yeah, totally agree. I mean, it's great seeing them all dressed up, isn't it? The
Yeah.
lads' suits a couple of sizes too big. You know, some
Yeah.
pull it off brilliantly. Others you're thinking maybe not yet. But no, I totally agree. Very rare for any trouble at a prom. Very, very rare. I've been to many and only probably remember one student who turned up drunk and he was turned
Yeah.
back out. So
Yeah.
there was no lasting, didn't end the didn't ruin the evening at all. And yeah, I agree. It's really, some of the conversations you have with kids that evening.
Yeah.
I think they know they've got their own after parties, and that's where they're all going to go and run wild or whatever in their own houses. But I think they treat it, as you say, really well, and the conversations are great, and it's a really nice end. So yeah, it's a nice and American part of American culture in coming in. So oh yeah,
Yeah.
I really agree with that. And yeah, you know me, I love my Christmas, and yeah, I really love the Christmas thing. I think we'll probably talk later in another episode about what we can do in your forms, but just something simple on that last day before winter break, just bring in some snacks. Have a if often in the school we worked at in other schools, you spend the last hour with your form tutor,
Yeah.
and that's absolutely fantastic. And yeah, it's a real lovely warm feeling. And
Right.
yeah, I think again we can talk later about giving students responsibility. But yeah, the open evening. So they're just really proud, aren't they? Especially if they've sometimes you get teachers from the other school come up to have a look and they remember them. I had that recently in my school. In my school, we have the elementary school and my secondary school on the same campus. But it's a very big campus, so you don't see them day by day. And they're so excited when their old head of year came to see what we were doing, and they could show off what they'd learned. So no, I think that's really great. Yeah, and I do yeah have some great memories of those three occasions.
Grand.
Cool.
So your final
Okay.
category.
Yeah, my final category is topics for good assemblies. I
Oh
think
yeah.
assemblies are really important in a school, and I think they're a real good chance for you and your form, or you on your own, to say something important, to capture the moment of what's going on in the school or what's going on outside of the school. So I think just before I talk about the topics, is we have to have a good theme in an assembly, make sure it all ties together, rather than just random bits of news or just a lecture. The kids are going to turn off very quickly. I think trying to make it engaging, an assembly. Obviously, PowerPoints, videos, something that either report on what they've been doing or what you've been doing, pictures that you can speak. You can speak maybe one or two sentences, not an assembly with a whole list for reading a slideshow to students, which we shouldn't do anyway. But I have seen it done in some
Yeah.
assemblies. I think as far as possible, make them positive and inspirational. I know sometimes we have to have assemblies where we have to talk to students about things not going well. However, on the whole, that can be done in homeroom. If you're only seeing your kids as a head of year, or it's your form's assembly once a term, twice a year if you're lucky, it's not really the time just to moan at how they could be doing better. And I think a great assembly is something that you can set them to follow up with another time, maybe check back in the form times, etc. It is good. Assemblies are really good to link the theme to any school philosophy, any school, or I mean, I'm in the IB at the moment, so in the IB approach to learning or IB learner profile, for example. So, in terms of good topics, I think number one would be local to world news. I think take advantage. Now, this means that you might not plan it till fairly soon before you're doing it, but obviously, there's mainly big events going on all the time, and I think if you can link a big news event to something the students can do about it makes a good assembly. So I did one recently on the floods in Spain, because our students have to do service, so go away and think about what we can do linked to that. I think if you're looking at world events, a really good thing for everyone to look at is a United Nations World Days website. It's got a couple of hundred world days. So I had a quick look before this evening, and yeah, on the 14th, it's World Diabetes Day. And being a diabetic myself, I will be
Right.
mentioning that in assembly this week. Today's a World Science Day for Peace and Development. So I
Right.
think the first thing we'll do, topics on relevant world news, local through to international. I think the second topic could be is making an assembly where students can do something about it. So an obvious one would be environmental issues. And local newspapers are a really good resource for teachers when looking at assemblies. Look at what's going on in the environment, what recycling options are there, what's going on in a local town or city where you work, and use them to try to make a link to something like the environment, climate change, where you can actually get kids to think about, well, what am I going to do about that? And with something like the environment, link it to them. So I am in Japan and I went to England for the summer. So I've noticed a big Japanese influence in England now. You've got otaku books, even Japanese words like that are being used in bookshops. So I took loads
Yeah.
of photos, Japanese food in English supermarkets, and I did like how Japanese cultures encroaching into the British environment. So the kids loved that. And I did one on. I went to France where I used to go as a kid. So I did before. I found photos of when I was younger, and I did ones in the same scene the summer just gone. So the kids really, I think, enjoyed seeing the teacher and how they can adapt to environments, etc. Um, the last one would be, yeah, linking to that about assemblies that relate to students. So, for example, look at culture. Look at the culture of the students in your schools. Any religious days coming up? I remember years ago in that school in Essex, an assembly on Diwali. I still remember it, 20 odd years ago. It was absolutely fantastic. So make sure you make the most. If you're doing this with your form, talk to your form. What do they want to show off about themselves? So some culture day would be absolutely brilliant. So linking it to students. You could also link to students and challenge them. Things like an assembly looking at skills they need, learning skills, set them targets. I did one last year about in the IB, communication skills is one of the five approaches to learning. So I linked it to the time of year being Christmas, and in Japan, New Year is much bigger, but it has similar ideas to the Christmas holidays in the fact that you meet old family again. So I made my big thing about communicating with family that you might not see this new year, but let them know you're there, and did the assembly. And then I spoke about how I've written a card to my auntie back in England. So really try to link it back to the students and make the assembly, make them think, okay, good, you're saying something that actually is affecting my life. And yeah, as I say, the assembly to the students, but also I think to the teacher, because kind of what I said first about getting yourself known in school, here's a great opportunity for you to show something interesting about yourself. So yeah, my ideas on assemblies, Tell.
Lots of good ideas there, Ollie. Yeah, I think looking back
Cheers.
over my career when I was teaching, often the best assemblies I saw, those in which, obviously a lot of thought had gone in to putting them
Yeah,
together by the teacher involved, but where kids performed or took
yeah,
roles.
yeah,
There was once a system I remember where, each form had to take an assembly on a rotational
yeah.
basis and give the kids the responsibility for coming up with the ideas. And they'll always surprise you. And
Yes.
the talents that they have will always surprise you because they're often hidden. And we just to finish on what was perennially the worst assembly I ever heard in my so it's a long, long time ago in a different age. But
Yeah.
the first head teacher at the first school I was employed at was getting towards the end of his career, should we say, and he only did one assembly a year. He left it to his deputies to do it, and every year it was the same assembly: the history of Southport Pier.
Oh, lovely. I'm
It
glad I
was
missed that
really
one.
exciting, and the kids really really loved it.
Yeah, absolutely
You
brilliant.
can
Well done.
imagine that was it. And then he would slide out and disappear for another year before he did another one.
Yeah.
So some people put a lot of thought into them, as
Yeah.
you've described, and some not at all. But you're not going to get away with the latter anymore.
I
It will
think,
be commented on.
yeah. And I think with the kids getting involved, I remember the first form I had, and we did one, like you said, each form would do one or two a year, and we did one on uh, how to look after each other in emergencies. And they're only year seven, so they were quite young. And one lad in the form did it. He was the ambulance, so he made the ambulance noise. And I'm not joking. 5 years later, as they left, they were still quoting that, so they'd remember that for 5 years. And it was all taken in good banter with the form. So yeah, it's good memories for the students. I think an assembly can be.
Two really memorable ones for me. Were very clever. I mean, if you're an entertainer, you're an entertainer, you're going to be great in front of the kids. There was a guy who was a head of lower school many, many years ago, and there was a spate of kids putting their trainers on rather than their shoes and going out to breaking. And he did a 20-minute comedy routine, I can't call it anything less, in which he took on the role of himself, Barry, because that was his first name, as the naughty student and went through changing his shoes, getting shouted at by the staff on 25 different occasions during the day. And it
Brilliant.
really brought home to the kids how ridiculous it was to have to change your shoes every hour.
Yeah.
And it really worked. He didn't have to tell them off. He didn't
No.
have to do anything else other than this comedy routine, and they got
Yeah.
it. And I think the other one that sticks out in my mind was ahead of year 11, as the kids were leaving 11 to 16 school, very cleverly, he pretended that when they came in year seven, he'd done a time capsule
Right.
in which he
Great.
predicted how certain of them would end up. And of course, he'd only done it the week before. So all of his predictions were funny and blindingly accurate. And really, the brighter kids got onto it and went,
Yeah.
very clever, sir. Some of them didn't and left the school believing that he had prescience, well beyond the norm. So
Brilliant.
you can play. My advice would be, it is a daunting thing if you're a young
Mm,
teacher and said you're now doing an assembly, let's say for the whole
yeah,
year group or lower school or whatever, or the whole school.
yeah,
But once you get over that, they're really valuable, and if you put it
yeah,
off, you'll feel $100, $1 million.
yeah.
If you can, $100 wouldn't be very good, would it? $1 million. If you can, and then the next time,
Yeah.
you'll move on.
No, I totally agree. It does feel good when you think, that assembly went well, because yeah, it's kids you don't know. You know, in a year group of 200 students, you're not going to know them all. So it's a good chance to, yeah, do something a
Yeah,
little bit different. I really like your ideas as well. Do something a little bit different would be a nice summary in an
yeah,
assembly, because I've,
yeah.
a 20-minute lecture on
Wherever,
shoes.
wherever you teach in the world, avoid the history of Southport Pier. That would be my final advice.
That's one
Right,
bit of
Ollie.
advice. I'll take
Yeah,
that.
lovely to see you again
Yeah, you
and
too.
to chat. Some great ideas there. Again, say to anybody
Yeah.
watching, like, subscribe, share the content of this video. We're happy to be shared. And as you'll see at the end credits, if you want to send us your ideas of your top threes, if you're an existing current teacher in any of those categories or others, then we're happy to get any of your ideas. And that is once again, Terry and Olly Talk Teaching at gmail.com. So all the best
That's
to
right.
everybody out there, and see you again
Yep.
next time.
See you
Cheers
again
now.
next time.
Bye bye.
Thanks.